Downtown Decatur, it's the Faber Files. Hello, I'm your host, Bill Faber. Because democracy demands debate, we present this program of public issues and interests. Nowhere else on broadcast TV do you see local conversation about issues and problems that face our community. Tonight's special presentation is a lecture by attorney Josh Rorscheib and a continuation of the Father Mangan lecture series, an annual presentation. This is one of the most exciting and interesting lecture series we have in the Decatur community. You know, Scripture says in the prophet Micah's book that what God requires of us is to do justice. And that was the point of Father Mangan's life, and that is the point of this lecture series and Josh Rorscheib's presentation this evening. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching.
I do want to mention the man who wrote the letter was local attorney Bill Faber, and he founded a legal aid clinic with Elgin Hoffman at the Community Church of God, where he met with several people who were being foreclosed upon and kind of learned about the need for this program. But I think we all really owe him a debt of gratitude for starting this program that's going to help a lot of our friends and neighbors. So I hope that at least gives you some optimism that people here, whether through small groups of 4, larger groups like IPA, or sometimes even just acting alone, can bring about a change. I'd like to kind of move to discussion of some current challenges. And first, I'd like to talk to you guys about the rise of gaming and gambling machines in our community. If you're like me, you might have noticed that popping up 5 at a time all over Macon County are digital gambling machines. And I don't think that Father Mangan would have had any degree of judgment whatsoever for the folks who play them, or even for the proprietors of the establishments that have these machines on hand. Fred Spanis told me that the only thing that he was intolerant of was intolerance. And so I'm not trying to blame any owners who have these at all. I mean, I think it's just a practical business decision that they're making. But I was shocked by how pervasive these machines have gotten so far, and how this trend is growing. So currently, Decatur, Illinois, just the city of Decatur, not Macon County, just Decatur, has 222 gaming machines in 48 locations. And the Illinois Gaming Board reports data on these machines. And from January until October, I think you'll be very surprised to learn that over $120 million have been played with these machines. $120 million. I've asked a lot of people, and I don't think anyone even, and they could tell by the way I was asking.
The library is now closed.
But no one thought, no one came with even 10% of this stuff. Now of that, they collect a stat at the state called net gaming revenue. And net gaming revenue, as best I can tell, is the nicest conceivable way of saying how much money people here lost. And that's exactly what it is. So 120 some million went into these machines, maybe 113, 112 came out. And that means people in our community lost $9.5 million from January until October. And again, this isn't all of Macon County, it's just Decatur proper. Most of these are low income people. Most of these people can't afford to make these kinds of losses. These machines are highly addictive, and gambling addictions fuel all sorts of serious social costs: crime, poverty, divorce, suicides, foreclosures, bankruptcies. So I think that we need to at least be alarmed. So then you have to ask yourself, well, if these have these social costs, why does our city and our state permit the rise of gaming machines to such a degree? And the answer is probably what you'd expect. It's putting profits over people, which is another one of Mangan's kind of current themes. So our state gets 25% of the net gaming revenue. So from just Decatur, they're going to get about $2.4 million just through October. The city gets 5%, so about $470,000 from those losses. And I think we've got to ask ourselves, just as a matter of public policy, is it worth it? Is it worth it to have that kind of evaporation of wealth for the city to get, frankly, such a small return? And I think it's also important to note that these numbers are going to rise for a lot of reasons. One, it's kind of a hassle to get a machine, and so a lot of establishments that have them now didn't have them in January. There's a lot more machines operating right now than there were in January, and there are more machines that are coming into our community all the time. So it's going to increase for that reason too. Also, right now, if you look at the numbers, they're paying out at about a 92% ratio, and the law allows them to kind of roll that back to 80%. So I think that kind of the methodology is, if you have better payouts, you have more action, you get more excitement and more volume. But over time, I think we can anticipate that those percentages of net gaming revenue of the total amount spent will probably increase. And we're seeing new locations open up. I think people expect to see these in taverns. They don't expect to see them in laundromats. And they don't expect things like Dottie's in South Shores and Lindy Lou's, which are these, they're calling them gambling cafes, which feel kind of like a hotel lobby, but with gambling. And it's just kind of a strange occurrence. I talked to someone recently who sells like food supplies, and he had someone come to him just wanted to buy. He was like, "Look, I need to be able to serve any food at all." And he bought a hot dog order so he could have a kind of a pretense of trying to get a gaming license. So I would submit that we're at a place with gaming, much like we were with payday lending before things really got out of control. If the city were to take swift and decisive action, we could probably stop the leak. We could put a cap on licenses. We could have a licensing fee, some of which could go to direct revenue to help gambling addicts. We could require places to have a certain percentage of revenue from food and drink, so we don't see these places like Lindy Lou's and Dottie's popping up and gaming machines kind of infesting laundromats and anywhere else that someone can be imagined to add a hot dog roller. So I suppose that the problem is we really need government to play a hand. We need government to be the trustee of the poor and the working people, because the powerful will not. And it's going to be hard for our local government to do this, particularly when we have a mayor currently who works for a liquor distributor whose clients, all local taverns, would likely object to any kind of added fee or any kind of added restrictions on the ability to have gaming machines. And city staff is likely to covet the gaming proceeds, insufficient as they are in light of the myriad of economic harms these machines cause. So there really are serious political challenges, but I think that this is going to approach a crisis level very quickly, and hopefully there will be a political will equal to that challenge. I'd like to go ahead and move on to another kind of city issue. I was, in doing some research for this, after what we learned about the city's noise ordinance, it became evident that the city fines folks for a whole lot of things. And so I'd like to show you a picture of Adlai Stevenson, the cat. This is my cat, and our cat. Kind of whose cat it is kind of depends on who's feeding them at any particular time. But we were recently fined $150 by the city for failing to vaccinate Adlai Stevenson, the cat, as promptly as they wanted us to. And you probably can't tell from the photo, but he's very distressed about all this. He has no idea how he's going to come up with $150. But we're fortunate. We'll be able to cover our cat tax. But a lot of folks have kind of more serious problems. Next, this is a picture that many of you might be very familiar with. This is the city of Decatur's escalating parking ticket structure. For a lot of working class people work downtown, and when you work downtown, if you want to park anywhere even remotely near where you work, you may be in a time-limited space. And over time, if you work downtown, it's just easy to get tickets. One can imagine a waitress at a downtown cafe whose last table stays a little longer than she might have liked, and is surprised to get a ticket. But I would just submit that a parking ticket in Decatur, Illinois, should never, ever be $100. And it should certainly not become $400 just because you don't have $100 right away to pay the ticket. I think this kind of gets into a similar space of being far more punitive than proportional to the offense. I think for most of us here in the room, a $100 fine might make a day from like a good day into kind of a bad day. I think we've got to remember that for some folks in our community, it starts a spiral of which bill are they going to be able to pay, which one do they have to put on hold, and which creditor can they maybe get away with letting wait a little bit longer. And it can lead people into real problems. It can lead people to go talk to a payday lender and kind of continue the cycle. But the city actually has in the city code of table 29.1, it's a table of offenses and fines. And it's this 11-page litany of 10-point font of things the city will fine you for. And I think it's just important to know that of this list, many of these things add up really quickly, and like $150, $250 per day per offense. Some of these rules and some of these offenses are just unquestionably good ideas, like the rules against setting fires in public streets or discharging firearms while boating on Lake Decatur. But there are others. There are other rules here that, the fines for having kind of not mowed your lawn recently enough. Sometimes it's just as simple as someone needing a little help to buy a lawnmower, or sometimes with more practical solutions. And people who might have a car in their driveway that isn't running tend to be people who can't afford to fix their car. So a lot of these fines and fees disproportionately impact the poor. So I think that there's a unfortunate but kind of common bond between Decatur, Illinois and Ferguson, Missouri. Apart from their most recent struggles. They've been criticized by the rise of trying to fill the city coffers with fee and fine revenue. And much like the city of Decatur, they have an enormous list of things they fine people for. And the fines are disproportionately paid by the poor. An attorney in St. Louis who spoke to these issues said, "These fees have nothing to do with justice. We have to separate the generation of revenue from the administration of justice." And you might think I'm exaggerating. That's Ferguson, Missouri's amount collected in fees. In Decatur, this year it's going to be likely in excess of $2.2 million. But what's really troubling is that there's a rapid growth. If you look over the last 3 years, in 2002, the fine and fee revenue was 1.59 million. 2013, it was 1.77 million. And in 14 is almost 2.2 million. So this is very quickly creeping up. We've got to keep an eye on this, and we've got to keep in mind that the folks who are paying most of this fine money are the poor. Kind of the last issue I wanted to speak to tonight is something that most of us voted on not too long ago, and that is raising our minimum wage. I learned from my friend Gary Minnick, who I believe is here, about one of Father Mangan's beliefs that a foundational matter to human dignity is the ability to make a living. And from talking to several of Mitz's friends, it became evident that he was really tormented by and mourned the struggles of the working poor and the working class neighborhood that surrounded his church. And so many of those manufacturing jobs have either left town or the pay is nothing compared to what it used to be. It's not something where someone can hope to escape poverty or have a middle-class lifestyle for their family. So I'd like to think he would be a supporter of raising the minimum wage. Currently, the minimum wage in Illinois is $8.25 an hour. It's $1 higher than the federal minimum wage. And I think a lot of people have some misconceptions about who exactly minimum wage workers are. The average minimum wage worker is 35 years old. It's not just a kid working McDonald's. Most of them work full-time. Over a quarter of them are parents. And often they earn the majority breadwinner. Quote from our Secretary of Labor, Thomas Perez. When we talk about the kind of folks whose lives will be made better by raising the minimum wage, we're not talking about a couple of teenagers earning extra spending money to supplement their allowance. We're talking about providers and breadwinners, working Americans with bills to pay and mouths to feed. So at its core, the minimum wage was intended to give a social safety net to the poor. And if we were to kind of track it back to 1968, we would see that minimum wage just hasn't kept pace with inflation. The minimum wage, just based on those figures, would be up around $10.65 an hour now. So we have kind of a moral question to ask ourselves about how much we, and we hear arguments. I think everyone in the room can both sides of this issue, but about how this might hinder small business growth. But I firmly believe what FDR said 80-some years ago, that no business that depends for its existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in our country. No one who works full-time in America should have to live in poverty. Right now, the Illinois minimum wage at $8.25 an hour, a worker would make $16,500 a year. And I'd like you to just try to imagine living on that over a year. They have to work a day and a half to even be able to fill the gas tank, which is, I think, really just a stark reality. Now, recently, like I said, we all voted on this question. In the November election, we were asked, shall the minimum wage in Illinois for adults over the age of 18 be raised to $10 an hour by January 1st, 2015? Yes or no? Across the state, 67% of voters said yes. Here in Macon County, it was 55%. I haven't been able to exactly run the numbers, but inside of the city of Decatur, I think the numbers are probably between 65 and 70%. Because the 55% of Macon County includes many of our most conservative regions. Now, the city of Chicago just approved a minimum wage to $10 an hour beginning next year that increases incrementally up to $13 an hour by 2019. And I think we should note that we have every bit the right that the city of Chicago does to do the exact same thing. The city of Decatur, if they have the political will and they're willing to make the working poor a priority, absolutely could raise the minimum wage for city employees at $10 an hour. And they'd likely be rewarded by their electorate, when over 65% of them would like the minimum wage to be $10 an hour. It's scary. Certainly council members would have to stand up to the Chamber of Commerce. They'd have to put people above profits. But I think it's also a reality that we could do it, because we haven't been preempted as a home rule community by the state of Illinois. So that's part of why Chicago, they were kind of rushing to do it, because they thought that the General Assembly might act and limit their ability to do it. But then the General Assembly ended the session without raising the minimum wage. So in closing, I just want to mention, we talked about how even one person writing one letter can make a huge change. There are a lot of ways that those of you who want to can get involved and can work on economic justice issues you care about, social justice issues. If you want to work on literacy, Project READ is in this building. I think their director is with us right now. But you can write letters to the editor. You can talk to your local elected officials. You can talk to folks who are going to run for office, and if you meet someone you really believe in, you can help them get elected. We've got a mayoral candidate, a city council candidate here tonight, and you can kind of get to know them, what their positions are, and see if they care enough about your issues that you want to help them. You can join a group like Mary Jo Comerford's Criminal Justice Group that does local activism and education on criminal justice matters. You could join Illinois People's Action. John Baird is kind of leading our kind of local effort now. You can volunteer, and the United Way has been developing a volunteer portal, but I think most of the folks here know that there are so many organizations that could use talented volunteers. And one other angle that I hope you'll consider, you can give. We have an incredibly philanthropic and generous community, as evidenced by the recent £1 million haul of the food drive. And the Community Foundation in Macon County can tailor a fund to get at any problem that you want to get at. And it really is a remarkable group. They started 15 years ago with nothing, and now they manage $28 million of funds to just do good here in Macon County. And that's doubled in the last 5 years, from $14 to $28 million in the last 5 years. So I'd like to now close as I began with one more homily from Father Mangan. And if you give me just a moment. So you can find it. A very learned man was once concerned about his spiritual life. And so he went to a wise old monk in a monastery and told him of his concerns. And the monk asked, "What have you done with your life?" The learned man answered, "Well, I've gone through the Bible 3 times." The old man thought for a while and replied, "Yes, but how much of the Bible has gone through you?" John in his first letter said, "Little children, let us love in deed and in truth, and not merely talk about it." Let us love in deed and in truth, and not merely talk or read about it. I believe a city like Decatur can really give us the opportunity to see how much of the Bible has gone through us. The violence, the poverty, the racism, the other civic concerns. If we only talk about it, maybe not much of the Bible has gone through us. Let us love in deed and in truth, and not merely talk about it. Thank you.
I just whispered to that young man, that was absolutely awesome. It was awesome, Josh. Be proud of yourself, and Mitch, I'm proud of you too, for gosh sakes. And I'm a lawyer. I'm proud of him as a lawyer. He's young, he's articulate, he's an advocate, but he's a down-to-earth, sensible advocate. This is one of the most outstanding presentations we've ever had in these Mangan lectures. Before we go further, there is a name that needs to be mentioned in connection with these proceedings, and he's not with us now physically, but I'm sure he's with us in spirit, and that's Reverend Bob Weidrich. Some of you knew Bob. Bob was a Methodist minister here in town, a beloved person, and he is the one who went to gates in London of the Staley Company and chained himself to the gate during the famous, infamous Staley lockout, and involved in every social issue there was in this community to his death. Of course, there's another one in the room here, likewise he's alive though, Jim Montgomery from First Press. He's a Bob Weidrich in disguise. You know? So be proud of yourself, Jim, and we're all proud of Bob. The program calls now for questions and comments. Are there questions here or comments for Josh? Anybody have anything they want to say? Yes, Lisa? Would you speak? Well, I'll repeat the question if I've been asked, please.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the gambling you talked about, does that include lottery tickets, or is that a whole different problem?
Yeah. She asked if the gambling numbers I cited include lottery tickets. Lottery tickets are certainly a troubling, regressive tax. One thing I read, the average lotto player might lose somewhere, depending on the state, between $100 and $400 a year. The average person who plays these gaming machines loses close to $2,500 a year. So I think in a lot of ways it's more damaging. But no, the data I presented is available right now. If you go to the Illinois Gaming Board, you can run reports based on municipalities. And I think I have a copy of this report with me that I'd be happy to show you. But it gives you kind of location by location revenue numbers, and then kind of total at the end, and it's updated regularly. The most recent data they have is for October, but I haven't been able to find any data on Macon County's participation in the Illinois lottery. And I looked, and that was going to be part of this, but it was running a bit long. So, and plus the county-specific data is pretty hard to find.
Josh is making me feel good. A long time ago, when I was a legislator, the lottery was in effect when I came to Springfield, but in 20 years I never voted for any gambling, and I was in Springfield when the cap was taken off the interest rates. First it was 6%, then 9%, and when the sky became the limit, I voted against it, so I feel good about that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Comments for Josh or questions? If not, we don't want. Yes, in the back, please.
I'd like to underscore what Josh said about the zoning ordinances disproportionately affecting the poor. Moreover, on top of what he said, if someone, for example, had a flat tire in their yard and they don't get that fixed in time, they could be subject to not only the fines, which can grow up to about $500 or so, but then be subject to arrest for contempt of court for not paying those fines, which they can then have $500 bail stacked on top of that.
Did most folks hear that story? Andy was talking about, I mean, people don't understand how just profoundly unreasonable these fine and fee regimes are and how much they can affect people. When you have offenses that mount up and are doubled each day, and then if you maybe don't find out about it, or serve the notice properly, you maybe just can't pay it as soon as the city would like, you can find yourself with a warrant and then having to post bond, and your fees are rapidly accumulating. And this is a hidden tax on the poor that the city is increasingly relying on. The numbers just showing, and frankly, the data that I pulled, those stats don't include, that's just one line item area of city fines and fees. It didn't even include, that section doesn't include things like the cat tax that we're paying for adolescents of the cat. But I think it's only part of the picture. But it does seem, the numbers certainly suggest that the city is getting increasingly reliant on these fees, and we need to be mindful of who's paying them.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I hear right now Martin Mangan telling me to say one thing to Josh Rorschach: please run for elected office. We need people like you. Your buddy Martin Mangan sat down and was arrested in a state lockup. We traditionally present this photograph to you for you to keep and treasure forever. Josh, thank you. That basically concludes our program, except for one thing. Pull out your song sheets. We traditionally sing Solidarity Forever to conclude these meetings. So if you don't have a song sheet, share it with someone and sing out with gusto. And I will back away from the microphone because I'm going to sing out with gusto too.
If you're able and so inclined, you might stand while we sing Solidarity Forever. And do all the verses. That is our custom. Go ahead.